World Championship F1 category here at the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. I'm Brett Keenan, joined in commentary by Matthew Elliott. Home Grand Prix for you yesterday in the F3, as well as a few others. We have a few, well actually we only have really two people that you could almost consider a home Grand Prix to for today, Sterling West and then Stanley Bellerose, even though he's in Canada. I mean, they're kind of lumped together in the same country thing. Probably going to get a lot of hate mail
No,
for that. Probably going to get a lot
not
of
really.
hate. You're going to get a lot of hate mail for that one. Anyway, we've been covering a lot of incidences that's happened over the course of the week proceeding into this Grand Prix. Of course, Charlie Whiting, FIA F1 director, passing away on Wednesday of this week, followed by a mass shooting in a mosque, or two mosques in Christchurch in New Zealand, killing 49 people and critically injuring two. No new news on the condition of the two critical, especially the 4-year-old girl that was sent to Auckland Hospital to be further assessed from her injuries. So be sure to show your support in the comment sections below. Hashtag this is not our NZ or things like that, and hashtag rest in peace Charlie Whiting. And about once the countdown begins for the race start, we're going to hold a minute silence for those killed in New Zealand, and from there we'll carry on. So once the countdown begins to say that they're ready to go, we'll begin the moment silence. So, I mean, Matt, you come from a country that kind of hail. I mean, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but it hails shooting. So this is nothing new to you, but it must be still hard to hear coming from a country like New Zealand that just doesn't believe in gun law. Well, it believes in gun law to a high extent.
Well, anytime something like this happens, it's a disgusting incident. You really feel for the families, and it's just deplorable and something that should never really happen.
Human nature is one of the most disgusting things that can never possibly happen. I mean, we're one of the very few races in human history, well, in the world, to kill our own for nothing more than pleasure, revenge, and all that kind of stuff. So people talk about the lions and the sharks being the world's #1 predator, the dinosaurs and all that kind of stuff. Well, dinosaurs really are just territorial beasts and haven't been around for millions of years, so probably the worst example. But you know, we just purposely go out of our way to kill people, and it's wrong. So the countdown's begun, so we'll hit a minute silence on 15 seconds to pay our respects to those who were killed. They always say a minute silence, but I always tend to just kind of go on because I actually never do put a timer on to keep in check. But you know, the longer the better. Pretty similar conditions we're looking at to F4, so we could be looking at some possible rain during the qualifying, which could be very tantalising in the prospects of reshaping up the formula for the grid positions. We know that certain drivers like John Lindbergh hail at this circuit and are quite quick. John actually took his second consecutive race win here. Actually, no, this was John's first race win this time last season. Followed through into Mexico. Yeah, so yeah, this was John Lindbergh's first actual race win. Heading into...
It's getting a lot of super or ultra softs fitted, so it might start raining during qualifying.
Okay, so according to Axel Ericsson, it's overcast qualifying and then sunny for the race. Now it looks like the drivers are actually paying a respect measure by not going out onto circuit straight away, which I apologise for those who were waiting for a car to come out on track. Now someone has come on track, and that's Christopher Tremaine, who's finally made himself available to race. The 39-year-old got a bit of a life outside of playing video games, so fair enough. First one out on the track in the number 34 Williams Racing, and for anyone viewing the Formula 1 qualifying yesterday, Lewis Hamilton on pole position with a 1 minute 20.1. It's unbelievable lap times we're seeing. I mean, these are the kind of lap times that we're doing on the game. So now that the actual F1 drivers are doing these kind of lap times, it's almost to a scary belief. Ferrari, so Hamilton on pole from Valtteri Bottas and Sebastian Vettel with Leclerc on the second row. Ferrari almost 7/10 to a second off, but I feel like Ferrari probably just didn't piece their laps together to an extent. So you don't... Qualifying is always an interesting telling point, because you always look at the facts that just because Mercedes qualify on pole every single time doesn't mean they're going to win the race, and we've seen that in Australia on several accounts. So Ferrari fans and Vettel fans, just be patient, wait till the race and see how that unfolds. But the interesting thing the point I was actually trying to get across from here is that Williams is just not looking fast at all this season, is it?
Oh no. To be consistently 4 seconds off the pace, it's pretty devastating for a team with such history. And if they don't fix it real quick, they might as well just fold it up or look for new leadership.
You can bring it down to so many things. I would like to think it's not anything to do with Claire Williams, because she has done a good job up until something's happened. I mean, I like to think a lot of it's got to do with Toto Wolff removing his backing from the team, because if you've noticed, Racing Point has kind of developed itself a fair bit more than what Williams has, which suggests that there was a bit of Toto influence in Racing Point. Probably not so much as now because of Lawrence Stroll's corporate takeover, but it'd be interesting to see where Racing Point sit, and whether Williams' qualifying pace is just bad engine modes, and that they could be a bit more competitive in the races. Because it's like you say, if we see a team with such rich heritage like Williams at the back of the field all the time, it's gonna be a very interesting outlook, and it could possibly lead to a disbandment of the team, which we'd hate to see. But I mean, I think eventually these things are going to happen. Even Ferrari and Mercedes at some point in time are going to lose funding and drop out, but you'll never know. So anyway, Christopher Tremaine will cross the line, does a 140.9 on his first flyer. Alvaro Vasquez does a 131.9 to open the account. Just to mention also that we have, like I said, in F4, we have had a change in F1 candidate. So Owen Bennett, who was originally in F4, is now in F1 as Daniel Alvaro's teammate goes P1 with a 31.3 on the Ultra Soft. Sterling West has gone to P2 with a 32 flat on the Ultras. Axel Ericsson on a 32.2. Nadir Ziyat on a 33.7 on the Softs. And Owen's done a 35.7 on the Supers. Eddie Bettenbell makes it a Toro Rosso 3-4 with a 32 flat, only 2/100ths of a second slower than his teammate of Sterling West. So Ferrari 1-2, Toro Rosso 3-4. It's almost a telling point of my past careers. The two teams I've raced in since the inception of the Transnation Formula 1 World Championship. Started in Ferrari, went to Toro Rosso for a bit, and now back at Ferrari. So it's telling me something here, but I don't know what. Anyway, waiting to see.
Maybe you're gonna go to Mercedes next.
Oh God, I hope not. No disrespect to Mercedes fans, but I just don't like the engine. The engine on the car is absolutely trash. Sounds like it's gonna die every chance you get. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. This year's Mercedes livery, I forgot that Mackenzie's running the number 1 again.
Oh, Mackenzie.
Well, if he wants to run the number 1 more consistently, he has to win more races and beat Daniel Val. Last weekend was a good showing that the championship's still a wide game, but he's still got to be able to keep the momentum up. And with a 32.7 on the softs, I don't think he's going to be able to do much from there. So, not sure what to make of that one. In all open honesty, no one's actually Now, let's see what John Lindberg's able to do. He's been out of the game for a little while, so he's kind of out of the championship hunt to a small degree. I mean, if he leaves this weekend 75 points behind the leaders, then his championship charge is pretty much over. But probably could take the knowledge of knowing that he'll still hold on to third, given that Alex Little, I think, is projected to not attend the next 3 rounds. So whether that has an effect on him as well as the effect on his Transnation Supercar Championship results, we don't know. Also, actually, just while I do that, and it is a little out of concept to talk about it, but the results for the Transnation Supercar Championship are in, and we had Chris Taylor, who dominated the entire weekend, with Mackenzie second in race 1, and then me second in the reverse grid race. So still holding on to the championship lead, just narrowly, but John didn't set a time. Oh no, John must have been on an outlap when we were watching him, so we'll see what he can do. As we'll actually jump to Melvin, who actually did a 34 flat on a soft tyre. So we're right on board with John as he goes through the fast S's. Very interesting line he takes. He actually kind of jumps the gear so that the car flicks itself out of kilter, then tries to... Oh, sorry, mid-yawn. Very interesting line he likes to take through that series of the first corners, locks it up into the hairpin. Although Mark and I kind of discussed whether we should call that a hairpin or not, because it's not exactly 90 degrees. Heading down the back straight, kind of free, revs it up 7th gear for a little bit just to keep the momentum down, locks the brakes heading into the tight left-hander that then follows into a tighter right-hander. You could almost call that a hairpin if it was a bit more sound. And then the trickiest part of the whole circuit, you've got to get this so proportionately right, otherwise you just get no traction coming out of the corner. In fact, you came off on that corner yourself, Matt, so that kind of defines the point of when you get on the gas is critical to getting a good run out of that corner. Around the last 2 bends, this is actually looking like a really good lap on the supers. God, this could actually be a 31. It is a 31. 31.5 on the
nice.
31.5 on the supers to only sit within 0.2 of a second of Daniel Val, and it splits the 2 Ferraris as well. So strategy won't. They'll probably get Avaro back out to try and get that position back, because otherwise strategy might come out of play. And the 2 Toro Rosso are still holding firm in positions 4 and 5, so that's still good for them. Jules Vanderbrug's gone up to P7 with a 32.5 on the Ultras. Mackenzie's changed his mind to go run the Super Softs. Chris Tremaine has moved to a 32.9. Nadir Ziat's also now running a set of super soft tyres, so not a lot of people sticking to their guns on a soft qualifying. As you can see, Melvin's now just moved to the super soft option. Owen Bennett, on the other hand, is sticking to his guns to do a soft run, though if he can't pull out a decent lap out of it, because he's currently done his best on the super softs of a 35.7, although that could be ultimately the point as to why he's done such a slow lap.
Then we have Stanley sticking to his usual and staying in the pits for qualifying.
Yeah. Doesn't want to get in the way of the other drivers, and most notably just doesn't want to give away too much facts to the F2 drivers watching. I mean, I'm watching all the time, but I don't really.
As I say that, he actually pulls out. Might be just installing his setup, but
yeah, one would say this. Daniel goes even faster now, 31 flat on the ultra soft tyre. He must be going for the strategy that we saw yesterday in the F3, but wasn't too sure as to why anyone would do it, which was the ultra soft to the super soft strategy, or he might just be running the ultra soft to soft strategy as he goes off the circuit to allow Owen Bennett through. Owen has done an improvement of a 33.6 it looks like, so he has improved on the soft tyre, which means he'll be able to use that, but he hasn't made much ground in the way that he's in the top 10, only just in the top 10, so I wouldn't take too much into it. And in fact, I think John's actually going to respond to this thing from Daniel, because it looks like even John's going to elect to run the ultra soft tyre to try and make a gap, or try and get pole position off Daniel. And now Mackenzie's on a run here, but he's actually getting, well, I wouldn't say he's getting impeded, but surprisingly, I think I know why Stanley's come out of the pits now.
Slipstream.
He's the bit of team play here between Mackenzie and Stanley. Originally rumoured to be teammates for next season for in Mercedes, but that theory's now being debunked with a new one, that Mackenzie Stewart will actually join John Lindbergh at Toro Rosso Honda next season. Now, actually, Stanley's just gone into the pits, so there was no team play in that at all. Okay. So, if anything, I think Stanley balked Mackenzie a little bit. That won't go down too well, if that was the case, but, yeah, because it looks like Mackenzie's invalidated his first run on the super soft tyre, so the one thing I've noticed about this circuit is that it evolves a little bit as you go along, so he's backed off again, so he's obviously not too convinced. He must have invalidated again. We've only got 4 minutes left on the clock, so anyone that's looking to go for another flyer will do so now. Navarro Vasquez is looking to do just that, because it looks like Sterling West has actually managed to get one up on Navarro as well, and we were a bit disappointed yesterday that we weren't actually able to get into contact with Sterling West, because it was his home race Grand Prix win, so we wanted to see what the feelings behind that were, but I suppose if he gets on the podium, he still won't be able to talk to us anyway, so that's counterproductive.
Navarro pulls in,
so I wonder what that one's about. Did he get some front wing damage, or was he just changing his setup a little bit to see how it felt? I mean, you can only do so much with Parc Fermé rules in effect, but it could have been that he was trying to tinker with the front wing or the brake bias and then go out and see if it would do anything. Axel Ericsson on screen here in the Alfa Romeo Racing number 90. I will say one thing for one prospect. Those Alfa Romeos are looking quite quick in the actual season. Kimi Räikkönen starting P9 in his debut return to Alfa Romeo, so a very good job there, and a good job also by Lando Norris to bring his McLaren into the top 10 despite his teammate not making it past Q1. Disappointed to see Alexander Albon in Q2, but luckily neither he nor Kvyat made it beyond Q2. And also a very good qualifying by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, Honda-powered Red Bull. A lot of people kind of asked the question whether Red Bull would be quick enough to stay where they are despite having the Honda engine. The answer to that question is obviously yes. There's obviously a lot of pace in that Honda engine and that Red Bull, just not as much as it used to be with the Renault. So
I think they'll have the reliability issues taken care of this year.
Well, that too. So that's probably because Toro Rosso last season would have been a perfect example of getting things right and ready. So it's kind of like the Lewis Hamilton effect with Mercedes, how they used Michael Schumacher to make sure that the car was ready to bring Hamilton into the fold. And obviously it worked out dividendly, so we could see the same thing. Disappointment for Renault though, especially for Daniel Ricciardo, not being able to make it into Q3. Ricciardo spent the whole weekend behind his teammate, and that hasn't changed at all from the race, qualifying either. So Ricciardo starting behind Nico Hülkenberg in position 12. Not a great result for Renault considering they were the 4th fastest car last year. So something's obviously changed in the front of things that's made them unable to pick up the pieces. Either that or the other teams have kind of come into the fray. So we're just waiting to see, with 1 minute left on the clock, who's going to do what. We've got John out. We've got Daniel out. John, I don't think... Although we've said this time and time again, we've always seen this when John comes out and we always question, oh, George Vandenbrug's up to P2 with a 31.3 on the ultra soft tyre, but we know that John's got it done a 31.5 on the ultra soft super soft tyre, so we know that he's got time to burn. So we could possibly see a 30 out of John if he can piece it all together and get a good lap in there. He's got a car in front of him in the form of not Axel Ericsson. No, actually it might have been Axel Ericsson, so suddenly the gap diminished quite a bit there. So we'll keep an eye on John. Mackenzie's decided he can't really afford to be in position 10 at the moment with even on the soft tyre, so he needs to pull something out of his bag here to try and go a bit further up. So he's gone for the ultra soft tyre. I keep saying hyper soft for some reason, but I don't know why, especially given that I'm looking at the tyre. Daniel very sideways out of the tight hairpin. In fact, this is the only circuit apparently in F1 on the F1 calendar that actually doesn't go in a clockwork position, because it actually goes up, then it goes down. So it's a very unusual layout circuit in that regard. So we're just waiting to see. So Daniel will be the first of the... Oh, actually Mackenzie were the first of the main runners to set a lap on what we like to call happy hour. So... Oh, Sterling goes P2 with a 31.2. Mackenzie will jump to P4 on a 31.4, so that's a pretty sub-average lap for Mackenzie there. Daniel will not improve. He does a 31.04, so he was only 1/100th of a second slower. That's if anything not but consistent there by Daniel to do a very close lap and be only off it by that much. Daniel, and as expected,
John with the 1:30.
1 minute 30.6 goes to the top. So the two former championship combatants will duke it out in the front row. Sterling West on his home Grand Prix will start P3 and gets a huge nose in the rear by Mackenzie, who's obviously not very happy at the idea of starting in P5. I think it was P5. I didn't quite... Actually P6, so Axel Ericsson's actually managed to jump up to position 4 during that skirmish. So Mackenzie in the splash zone for today's race. John Lindberg on pole from Daniel Vale, Sterling West, Axel Ericsson, George Vandenbrug, Mackenzie Stewart, Eddie Bettenbell. Alvaro Vasquez will be disappointed he's not up further than he should be. Christopher Tremaine, Nadir Ziyat in the 10, Melvin Stabaka, Owen Bennett and Stanley Belrose in the last position, not setting a time, and of course running the New Zealand flag as a mark of respect for those killed. Now, the reason that we've run through the grid order today is that we're going to be holding we're going to be holding a formation lap of silence in respect to Charlie Whiting, who tragically passed away to an embolism. Who unfortunately tragically died to an embolism, which is a blood clot to the heart. So basically, in technical medical terms, he died of a heart attack caused by a blood clot in his main heart artery. So a lot of people showing their respect in the Formula 1 pit paddock with a rest in peace Charlie, or Charlie, #Charlie Whiting on their cars. We elect to go for a more, well, since we can't really do it ourselves, and I'm sure that the Codemasters were not going to go out of their way to do an update to put the names on the car for the weekend. We're going to hold a formation lap of respect. So once the cars get on the way, we'll remain silent until the grid, until John lines up on the grid. So the car's now going onto the grid. The formation lap is complete. John Lindberg versus Daniel Vahl. We've seen this grid format for quite a while at the start of the season. Kind of fell away when John started to interfere with his racing. Sterling West, a great qualifying result in only his second race in F1 to sit on the front on the second row alongside Axel Ericsson, who was pretty strong around here last season. But either way, the light's going to build up. We go through our normal process. I realised in F2 last weekend that the lights went out straight away and the cars were off, so I'm a bit surprised by that. Either way, it's now lights out and away we go, and it actually looked like it was a pretty good start there by Daniel initially, but it looks like John's got the first initial launch. Mackenzie's going to try and launch the car up the inside, gives Daniel a hit up the rear.
Plus wing.
But John Lindberg's going to take the lead from Daniel Vahl. Mackenzie in P3 from Axel Ericsson. Then George Sterling's had a pretty bad start to drop all the way to P6. But I mean, it's the first turn. Oh, and I think Owen's just been spun. He has. Nadir. I just saw Nadir get into the back of Owen. Oh, and he didn't spin, but it was very close to one. But yeah, John Lindberg will carry through. Here comes Sterling West up the inside of George van der Brug. Into the hairpin, nearly very collects Axel Ericsson in the result. In fact, Axel has gone wide, which almost suggested that Sterling might have actually gave him a tap or there was desync. But yeah, Mackenzie will have front wing damage, I think, from the looks of it, judged by the fact that he did give Daniel Vahl a bit of a belting into turn 1. And as to be expected, though, there was a lot of ambitious diving from the two drivers as Mackenzie has a look up the inside as John actually goes a little deep into the hairpin, or the tight corner, which almost set Daniel up to spare the rear of him. There's a bit going on in the midfield at the moment. Well, the midfield of the top. Oh, Tremaine down the inside. He's... What was that all about? That was an interesting incident. They're all bunched up now as a result of that incident with Christopher, who looked like he went up the inside of Melvin and then just launched it on the accelerator and just spun it as Avaro makes a move on Melvin to get P7. Quite a bit going on at the moment. Mackenzie right on the rear of Daniel at the moment, trying to harass the Spaniard into another mistake like he did in Japan, which actually at the same time Sterling's not exactly too far off this party either, so Sterling will be looking to give Mackenzie a bit of a rough time as Mackenzie decides to try and send it. Daniel actually had the right in mind to get the car out of, move the car out of the way. They're going to go side by side down the straight. Which car's got the straight line speed? Well, I think that Ferrari just edging ahead of that Mercedes is enough to say that Mackenzie's car is down the straight. Sterling down the inside of them both. They're going to go 3 wide into the corner.
Oh my goodness.
Mackenzie prevails from it, but Sterling just very nearly decides, I'm going to take you both. But yeah, so Daniel's lost 2 positions from that. Mackenzie will be coming under siege from Sterling, who makes a bit of a mistake coming into the never-ending left hand. And this is helping John Lindbergh pull away quite extensively. At the moment, Daniel will be just looking to try and salvage anything he can to keep his championship lead intact. The last thing he'll want is to add to his DNF count from Japan and from Russia. Of course, he was considered a finisher in Russia, but that didn't... The 1 point didn't help him in that case. As Sterling decides for a last-minute lunge on Mackenzie at the first turn hairpin. Sterling actually has some very good pace, it looks like, around the Circuit of the Americas, so it does kind of beg the question of if he was, what he was saying during the week about the F3 race. I feel like he has been downplaying his chances just to give people a slight sense of hope, but you can, I mean, if you're going up against the top guns in F3 in the F1 race, you're clearly not bad at this track.
Yeah. It seems like he's a little more aggressive in this F1 race too.
I suppose he would be, because he's going up against people that he knows he has to be aggressive of as he tries to go around the outside of Mackenzie. And the thing, Mackenzie tries to go deep on the brakes, forces Sterling out wide, which could be subject to investigation, because under no circumstance should you ever escort a person offline. He actually, I wonder if that was an attempted go at trying to unsettle the rear of Mackenzie's car into a spin there, because that was very late in the way of moving. Mackenzie goes very wide into the second to last corner. I actually thought Sterling would have had a go there, because it was a good enough attempt to try and do it as DRS is activated, so Mackenzie's going to try and force the issue here. Mackenzie probably I would almost call that as overly defensive driving there by Mackenzie. In fact, it balks his run into the corner and Sterling gets the move, but they've both they're both gone. That, now, I'm sorry Mackenzie, you can bag me as much as you want for me, that was your fault. You should have backed out of that corner. That was Sterling's corner. So, an unfortunate circumstances, and that's going to have championship ramifications by quite a bit unless Mackenzie can recover from that. But, and I mean, you've got to say, it comes down to what happened in F4. People have to realise that when you're in a state of mind, it's a corner management that if you know that the car's in front by a huge stretch, you don't fight those issues, do you?
No. And that's not really an overtaking spot. Just fall in line, follow through, then... And then have a straight coming up.
And then you have an attack on the hairpin as well, so it's not... Although, this has actually helped... Oh no, it actually hasn't helped anyone. If anything, it's helped Daniel get a reprieve from this. It's helped. There's a good battle here going between Eddie Bettenbell and Axel Ericsson for position. There's another Sector 2 incident, but nothing's showing up on the thing, so whether the incident... But the problem about the whole situation there is that it's allowed John to just bolt away from the field, 4.6 seconds. Now, in saying that, everyone roughly is on the same strategy, because everyone else is on the soft. Now, Sterling's coming in. Is this... I'd say it's either a strategy change or is it a front wing change? No, it's a strategy change, because I didn't think the front wing was damaged in that incident. He won't be happy though, because he would have felt like he had that move done, and then next thing he knew he was facing the wrong way. He might just lose this position.
Sterling's gonna have to go for this two-step.
Yeah. Just
if he shows the same pace that he's been showing, it might work for him. Gonna have to push really hard though.
Yeah. I mean, we saw that. I think we saw the strategy. It was either F4 or F3 that we saw this kind of strategy where the driver yes, it was F4. Bradley Betts, who started on the ultra soft tyre against all those who started on the supers. So, and then Luke, of course, who started on the soft. So it came down to Brad having to do a two-stop strategy, but he had the pace to more than willingly keep it up. But then, of course, he was caught in a last lap skirmish. In almost similar circumstances to the Mackenzie Sterling situation with Joseph Roberts, except in that regard they were both side by side heading to the S's, and Brad had to... Oh, did we just lose Addy to disconnection? Yes, we did. So
yeah.
Now Stanley's actually made some really good ground all of a sudden too, because he was about 3 seconds behind these two. And now suddenly he's within striking range of Axel Ericsson for what is actually right now the podium. So Axel Ericsson currently holding down a podium position as of this moment, with Melvin also looming in the distance for a podium as well. So the contact between Mackenzie and Sterling has really thrown a curveball in the mix, and Mackenzie's also come in for a set of supers as well. So he's changed his strategy to a two-stop as well. Although we say this now, and likeliness they'll just push them to the very end of the race. That battle between Avaro and Sterling has kind of gone more in the way of... so it wasn't a disconnection. Addy's game decided to crash.
Oh.
So that's disappointing. He should be able to get back in time. He's not. He's got about 16 seconds to his teammate, who's actually got a good battle here between Avaro and Georges. Georges now down the inside of Avaro. Georges, what happened to Georges? Oh, he's come in. He's come in recently for something, because Avaro now decides, I'm not giving you that position there, nut. But now has to admit defeat down there and drops the position. So Mackenzie's now 9 seconds behind this battling duo. They're getting it. I mean, Avaro's doing his absolute best to try and do something about it, but he's just not. As Axel gets a 3-second time penalty. Oh! And Sterling does the fastest lap of the race during that whole skirmish. In front of it, well, behind him, sorry. And then Mackenzie responds with the fastest lap as well. So, going by the points gap right now, as... Okay? Where has he done that? Oh, okay, so he's done it where Mackenzie and... Interesting. Okay. So he did it where Alvaro, where Mackenzie and Sterling went off. And Nadir, who's also come in at some point early in the piece, is 43 seconds off position 11. So I don't know what's happened to Nadir. He was in the top 10 originally, but now he looks like he's lost some ground. But yeah, so looking at the championship picture right now, Daniel will recover 18 points over Mackenzie. Well, actually, it'll be 17 points now, as it looks like Christopher's made a mistake or something, or someone's... Oh no, it'd be at expense of Avaro, my bad. So Avaro's mistake has cost him.
And the two front runners should be coming in this lap or the next. And the same for Axel.
Sorry, what? I didn't quite catch that.
The ultra soft runners will be coming in probably this lap or the next.
They'll be pushing it to get to the one stop window, which will be about
9 laps.
Yeah, 9-10 laps at best. But Daniel made this mistake last weekend at Japan, where he pushed too hard on tyres that shouldn't have been going that distance, and it cost him big time at the end. But I'm sure he's probably just back. I mean, the gap between him and John has kind of stabilised between 5 seconds, so I'd say that
John's in.
Yeah, okay, so John's changing his strategy. Is Daniel reacting? No, Daniel's going to stay out. So Daniel's obviously looking to try and get the extra tyre freshness. And there's a Sector 1, Sector 2 incident, which would suggest probably Nadir.
Christopher.
Yeah, Christopher. Had to be one of them, because they were the only two that are in Sector 1 and 2. So John will come out just ahead, well, just behind Owen Bennett in the other, well, in the other driver, only other driver on the soft tyre. So Owen's done a pretty good job actually as well to keep in amongst this, and he's charging down the barrel of... He's now cleared Eddie Bettenbauer, who looks like he's actually managed to get back into the race too, so that's good to see. He's now in the pits, so Mackenzie will be in 9th place, so that changes, although with Daniel in the lead, that still changes the championship picture. If Daniel was to win the race and Mackenzie wasn't to finish, it would basically just restabilise the championship as to what it was before the Japanese Grand Prix conclusion. So it would go back to 54 points, to which then Daniel would only have to finish pretty much in a position at Mexico that if he finishes in 50 points ahead of anyone in Brazil, he'd win the championship. So I think Daniel will be cursing himself a little bit that he didn't finish the race in Russia, given that would have been a 15 point, 14 extra points in his pursuit, which meant that he would have a 40 something lead, 34 point lead coming into this weekend with the DNF. So John's easily cleared Daniel. We'll wait and see what the gap is in a second, as Sterling has jumped Axel in the pit stop shuffle as well, but we do expect to see Sterling back in at some point to do the 2 stop. So Stanley leads from Melvin and then Owen in P3. These are the only 3 drivers yet to have made a first stop, and almost immediately you can see behind Owen there's a raging Red Bull looking to capitalise on the fresher tyres. They're both on the same tyre, but John's tyres are 9 laps fresher. Well, it says 8 laps. See, this is the part that's confusing me a little, and I've just only started noticing it too, and I think Guy was the one who made the point about it in F2. We've done 10 laps on the track, but they've only done 9 laps on their tyres, so where the logic in that lies, I don't know, but John...
The lap count is actually the lap they're on, so they've only done 9 laps.
Ah, fair enough. So we'll just wait and see if anyone's going to blink.
So when the leader crosses the line, it will switch over to lap 11.
Yeah, fair point. Ah, yes, good point, because they've actually on the 10th lap now, but of course the counter will read it as 11, so it makes perfect sense, because you actually don't count the first lap as the first lap, because it's not. It's the zero lap, but anyway, we'll continue. So John's cleared Owen. The gap is 5.3 seconds between, no, 5.8 seconds between Daniel and John. Well, actually, it'll be Daniel and Owen. John is probably about 6 seconds ahead now, as opposed to that pit stop shuffle.
I would say he actually got an undercut on that.
Oh yeah, for sure, he definitely got an undercut from that one. The undercut here is pretty powerful, so because the tyre deck does fall away quite a fair bit from what I've seen as Jules continues his pursuit after Axel Ericsson. I think let's take Mackenzie and Sterling out of the frame because they're on an alternative strategy. Your effective race order should be, once the pit lane shuffle is finished, we'll just wait and see if John can clear Melvin. And for people at home viewing, this is for position, keep in mind, so Melvin has no right or obligation to get out of John's way if he doesn't want to. As Tremaine comes out from the pits, Melvin looks to try and get the over and under. In fact, he does get the over and under on John. This could get a bit messy.
Oh, guys, don't do it.
No, looks like Melvin had the right of mind to back off, and we had a Sector 1 incident, which is... I don't know, where's Sector 1? Oh, hang on. No. Was it Daniel? No. I have no idea. Anyway. What was I saying? Oh yeah, your corrected order should be John Lindberg from Daniel Vale, and then Axel Ericsson will be P3 from Jules van der Brug. We think Stanley and Melvin should rejoin behind behind Jules and in front of Mackenzie, so I think, I mean, that's just basis, because Stanley should be expected in about this lap.
Yeah.
That's about the right number. No, he's going to stay out one extra lap, so he's obviously looking to try and find a means. And unfortunate, although in saying that, as Melvin comes in and gives the fence a very big whack, we see Stanley running this strategy, which is clearly the one stop from supers to soft, and running a longer strategy. This might not necessarily be the strategy he runs in F2, so for people in F2 watching, I wouldn't be taking this race of Stanley's too much consideration, because he's obviously doing it deliberately to make sure that to make you think he's going to be doing that strategy when he's actually not. So okay, so my theory was relatively correct, that I thought Mackenzie would have been actually behind Melvin based on those numbers, but I think Mackenzie must have upped his game a little bit to make sure that he didn't get a car in between him and his pursuit of Jaws. So Stanley was quite a bit further forward, so I actually think Stanley might be ahead of Jaws when this happens, as Daniel now makes a move on Owen Bennett for position 3, which is effectively P2 at the moment anyway, because of the fact that Stanley's not in this for points, as he's actually now getting John Lindberg for company at the moment. So whether Stanley's going to play the hold game for a bit, no, Stanley's going to come in and get his stop on the way. Nice entry there for Stanley as opposed to Melvin, who decided he'll just throw the car in straight into the fence. So pit stop made, and it will be the soft tyre as usual. We'll see. So he'll come out behind Stanley, behind Sterling, behind Axel, but critically will be ahead of, more ahead of Melvin, who, or ahead of George, sorry. So we should expect to see Sterling and Mackenzie in roughly about 3 laps time. I don't think you'd want to push it any further than what you've got, because otherwise then you're going to likely hurt your chances of a comeback. Owen's doing a good job to hold down P3 at the moment. We think he'll be due in about a couple of laps time. We know from a fact from F3 that the softs can go 18 laps, but it was not the most idealistic idea, because we saw Sterling do it in F3 and we were kind of scratching our heads as to whether or not the tyres would hold on for that duration against Robin Kreft, who went in 2 laps later. But it did turn out to be the winning formula for Sterling in that regard, but I don't think you'd be wanting to go too far on those tyres. I mean, we've still got 12 laps left to go, so for John it's 18 laps. He'll be running 18 laps on these softs. For Daniel, it'll be only 17 laps. As Sterling is starting to actually make ground on Owen at the same time. Christopher Tremaine's in that battle as well, but he's out of sequence from the rest of the field. He's a lap down in position 12. Nadir, I think, is also a lap down. Eddie's just controlling, trying to salvage some points out of what's happened when he was running as high as 4th place, so he'll be furious with that game crash and be just looking to try and salvage some points and finish the race. Our only DNF today, Alvaro Vasquez, who's, we're still trying to figure out how that's actually come to light, but we'll no doubt get something out of that.
Notice Owen has pretty good straight line speed.
Sorry, who
Sterling
does?
didn't really close. Owen, Sterling didn't really close the gap on him.
No, well, that's one of the contrasting points that we've tried to underline so much about USA, is that it's a very tricky circuit in the way that you've got to either, as Owen locks up both the front wheels heading into the last turn, you've got to be able to tune your car up so it's either fast in the straights or better in the corners. There's not really an in-between, as Sterling goes a bit wide. Actually, he wasn't too sure what to do there with Owen locking his brakes.
Oh, he lost it.
Oh, he has too.
I don't know what happened there. That was weird.
I would say...
Unless he's cooked his tires.
I wouldn't say that. I think he's probably just gassed it up a little bit, or he's grabbed the outside curb coming out of the first turn, and because his tyres are worn, they would have just not... There would have been no give in the traction, so he's come out, he's rejoined just in front of Jaws, he's just allowed through. Mackenzie shouldn't be too far behind that, so if Sterling wasn't convinced he needed to pit in soon for a new set of tyres now, he's most definitely going to need to do it now, because he's missing a front bit of his front wing, so expect to see him pretty much in as soon as humanly possible. Still no sign of Owen, and that underlines a lot about the dirty air effect and all that kind of stuff as well. It's like when you want to get past a car, you also get very tentative about how you want to do it. So I think for Sterling, he just wanted to be able to size up a move and you know, size up a move and get it done. But unfortunately for him, it looks like he's just pushed a little bit too hard when it didn't matter, or when it didn't count for him, and he's ended up in the fence. Now George is coming in, although I suppose he probably needed to, because he was due to... How did Sterling not get a 5-second stop go for that? My goodness.
Did he just fly into the pit lane?
I'm positive he just flew into the... Okay, so George is retired in the pits. This is interesting. Why did he give it up though, is the question. He was doing reasonably well. He was going to be in for some points, so I don't know why he's actually elected to pull it in and give it up, but I think I know what the problem is. Although in saying that, he was in full tit, so there was something I didn't... no, that's alright. Anyway, I'm just overlooking things.
Axel with the spin.
Oh dear. Well, mustn't have been a big spin, because he's still... Wait a minute. It said he retired from the session. Why is his car still driving around?
I think he just got disconnected. I think it's just said it was, he left the session.
Well, that doesn't help the case at all. But anyway, there's a battle going on between the two teammates, Sterling and Eddie, and Sterling's now just going through Jaws. I would have thought it. Yeah, I think that's a rage quit. I still think that might be a rage quit, despite that. I mean, it's very unusual to disconnect so fluently in the pit lane. Now, the gap between John and Daniel hasn't actually moved. It's still stale at 6.8 seconds, with Owen still on the circuit. 10 seconds, actually 10 seconds behind those two. That's not 10 seconds behind John. Daniel is not too bad for a guy on 17 lap worn soft tyres. Christopher Tremaine's in a bit of a position where it's like he knows he can attack, but he can't because he's a lap down, as he lets Stanley through, charging down the wire. And then Axel not too far back from them, despite his spin that I've been told about that I didn't see. That's very interesting. There's the at now in from position 11. If he claws his way back through, he should... get a points position finish if he can claw his way up in the next 9 laps and get Jaws. So we'll see. He's got 46 seconds to make, but the AI doesn't trundle through very quickly, so it should be, I would say that we'll see a change of position there. And now Owen's in after 17 laps on those tyres, and he's come out behind Mackenzie on a set of ultra soft tyres.
It should be able to get him to the end.
It should do. It'll be a bit of a mission at the end of it, but he's obviously looking to try and capitalise on that. And I mean, we did see John and Daniel go from the softs, ultras to the softs anyway, so it is kind of a reverse strategy to those two. So it is possible, and I think I would say the lap number would be about correct. So Owen's looking to try and utilise the strategy to get on the podium. He is technically in with a shot for it, because we know Mackenzie's not going to be able to stay out any longer. He will have to make a stop. Axel is not that much further up the road on a set of soft tyres, so we should see a bit of a burst from Owen on these tyres, so long as he doesn't overcook them too much in his pursuit to catch the drivers in front. So despite the spin, Axel's still holding down a potential podium what with Stanley not in the race picture as a reserve, so Axel's looking to actually add to his USA podium of last season, as Mackenzie's now in from position 5. He'll most likely jump on the Ultra Softs himself. No, another... Oh no, it does say...
Oh, he's got Ultras.
It just looks like softs on my screen. Oh no, they are Ultras. So, he's going to drop... he'll come out ahead of Sterling. But Sterling should have the momentum coming into this complex, so I think... No, I think Mackenzie's made the clear of it, so... There's a 12-second gap between Mackenzie and Melvin. So... And with Owen now basically trucking along, probably going to be likely to do fastest laps now, I think Mackenzie's going to be only able to take a P6 finish from today. So that's going to give Daniel a bit of a reprieve in the championship heading into Mexico. So it's been a pretty up and down race so far. Who would you think so far has earned the mantle of driver of the day?
Probably Stanley. Started at the back because he didn't qualify, and went up at the top ever since the start of the race. And also, Axel has done a fantastic job today.
He's always been...
He's kept his nose clean and...
Yeah. And that's the funny thing too about it too. He's always been saying that if he wants to get out of people's... You know, he doesn't want to be stopped in people's manner. The funny thing about it though is that Axel actually hasn't made a position from the start. Owen's made 7 spots from the start. Stanley's made 10. And Melvin's also made 5 spots from the start. So the biggest winners of today's racing has been, if you disregard Stanley for the fact that he's a reserve, the biggest winner today has been Owen with 7 spots. Could be 8 by the end of this race if he can catch Axel in time. And then Melvin, the biggest loser is, you would have thought Mackenzie, but he actually started P6 anyway, so he's only lost a position from the start. The biggest loser has actually...
Sterling?
Yeah, the biggest loser has been Sterling West with 5 positions from the start, followed by George Vandenberg, who's subsequently, if he has rage quit, it's an immediate disqualification from the race, so even if he does finish in 10th, it won't stay 10th because of that. So Nadir will be looking down the barrel as he does back-to-back fastest laps of the race. You don't see that too often, and so Nadir's just looking to try and get that points position from Georges, but he pretty much is guaranteed it anyway if Georges has rage quit, which is not a good look on people, especially when you see it right smack bang in the middle of the bloody broadcast. As Owen now...
Owen posts the fastest lap.
It's actually funny because I think Nadir did the fastest lap first, then Owen responded with the fastest lap, and then Nadir's fired back with the fastest lap, and now Owen's gone back and done it again. So keep close attention, pay close attention to Nadir and see if he can react and respond to that as well. Funnily, Mackenzie on these new tyres hasn't made any dent on the fastest lap. In fact, if anything, he's denting.
And that's why, right there.
He's just denting his penalty gap that he's making.
He keeps cutting those corners, so they just invalidate that fastest lap.
Yeah, so it's coming down to the basis that I don't know how many penalties he has at the moment versus Sterling, but he might lose a spot to Sterling based on these numbers. No indication on...
2 more penalties than Sterling right now. 6 seconds.
Yeah, so Just having a look at the field at the moment. They're kind of spread out a little bit in that regard. Actually, here we go. So there's Nadir making the pass on Georges for position 10, and that's a points finish. So another points finish for Nadir, who
coming on strong this last part of the season.
Yeah, he had a bit of a rocky start on his switch to Haas after original team boss Daniel Vale wasn't too overly impressed with his performances and helping him gain the constructors points. So there was a mid-season swap with Matthias Facelli, who ended up resigning from the season for reasons I'm not too sure about. In fact, I still haven't even been able to get in contact. Well, every time I've been in contact with him, I've never actually thought to ask him why he pulled out, but he's still taking part in the Transnation Supercar Championship and all that kind of stuff, so he's still very much part of the TNF1 community in that regard. As far as that goes, just ride with John because we haven't followed him for most of this race today. He's been out on his own, and I think a lot of people kind of expected to see John up the front dominating this race because of what happened last season. He just showed his hand, and this is about the time where Noah Weck, our F1 2017 championship points leader, abandoned the championship, which then handed the reins to me. And then from there it was pretty much Stanley must have been checking something because he was paused there for a second. I thought he had actually disconnected for a moment, but he was just paused to check something, and he is now carrying on. He lost a bit of time to Axel, but nothing too drastically serious. Now Mackenzie's right on the back of Melvin at this point, and has earned another 3-second time penalty, which is not going to help him in his bid for anything as he tries to make an ambitious lunge at turn. God, I don't even know how many turns that would be anyway, but with those fresher ultra soft tyres, Mackenzie is going to have the measure of Melvin very shortly. In fact, Mackenzie's going to go for a dive here, and I think, and the problem that lies in it is that it's all right to be aggressive, but when you're just continuously just throwing the car up the inside at every given possible moment, being late on the brakes so much, that's where you get into trouble. And that's a little bit to do with what happened with him and Sterling, is that it just comes down to you just got to be careful on where you pick your overtakes, where you do your moves. You can't just throw your car up the inside every single time and expect the driver to just, like in Daniel's case, who saw it coming, part the way and let them, give them space to do it. It's not going to happen all the time. So you got to be careful on those kind of ones, because if you do that and you end up, and the driver next to you ends up shutting your door, well, you don't have a case to answer for, because you're the one who threw the car up the inside. And that then leaves it up to the person next to you to decide, well, okay, I've seen you, I'll give you the space, or hang on, what the hell, what's this? And then, bang, the contact's made. So, it comes down to driver awareness more than anything when you make those kind of moves. If you've got the ability to do it and pull it off, that's great. If the driver next to you does it, sees you do it and gets out of your way, that's great. You just got to be careful about it, because if you get in an accident, you're in trouble for it, because you're the one who made the dive.
Yeah.
So Owen's still holding down a pretty good result here. Currently P5. He's thought he would have to mount an podium attack on Axel, and I mean the gap is diminishing, but not too much to the point where it's going to be a problem.
Oh, I just looked at the penalties. If Owen gets within 3 seconds, he'll take the spot.
Oh, will he? So he's he's literally on 3 seconds now. It's just moved to 3.1 as Mackenzie gets another penalty. If he's not careful, he's going to get disqualified.
Yeah, we found out about that this weekend too. The 27 seconds. So 9 penalties will get you DQ'd. Oh, Owen.
Okay, so that's now remedied the situation. So that's back to square one for Owen. But he is still he's still making some pretty good ground on Axel anyway. And if he stays in the 3-second barrier anyway, there is still, although this is the final lap actually, what am I thinking? I should actually kind of go back to the front.
Nope, we're on 26.
Oh, okay, sorry, my glasses. I'm not wearing my glasses today, so I can't see that well. For the third race in a row, I have failed to start the race with Boogity Boogity Let's Go Racing, so I'm very disappointed in myself.
I'm actually happy you didn't, because I watched back the F3 race, and I gotta say your southern accent is atrocious.
Oh, come off it. Oh, it's not that bad. I've heard worse. Anyway... that really hurt my feelings. I'm kidding. Anyway, so yeah, so the gap is starting to drop between Axel and Owen to a point. I mean, I think if Owen had maybe about a lap or two more, he might have been able to mount a full-scale attack. Yesterday in F4 we had a driver, Diogo Cruz, who earned 27 seconds worth of penalties on his way to a disqualification. I don't know how many penalties Mackenzie has, but I don't think he's in any major risk of disqualification. If anything, he's probably been given the warning of disqualification if he doesn't fuck his ideas up and stay off, stop violating the penalty system. So yeah, he'll be ruining his mistakes for what happened with him and Sterling, because he's now basically given Daniel a points haul return. It's not a massive points haul return because Daniel hasn't been able to actually take complete advantage of the situation due to John kind of dominating the race up the front. We've got the engine glitch going on with Red Bull at the moment, as Christopher has now made the move to take P11 from George van der Brug, but George, of course, is not there, so it doesn't matter. Nadir is going to take that points finish. The two Toro Rossos are going to finish up 8th and 9th, but for Sterling it's going to be a matter of what might have been. Although in saying that, Sterling is within shot of attacking Melvin on the final lap, so keep an eye on that one.
And Mackenzie's going to drop 2 spots from penalties. Got 21 seconds.
21 seconds. Although that's to say, because Sterling and Melvin will probably have penalties apiece, so that will kind of balance out as Sterling actually gets another one, as does Stanley. Although I think that's the first one I've seen from Stanley, so that's not too bad. Christopher gets a penalty. Oh, we're going to just start seeing the races come alight. Now, just one thing, there is one thing I want to clarify of the rules of the thing. Now, if you were to DNF during, and you earn 90% of the classifications, that's fine. If you get disqualified, on the other hand, that doesn't matter. So, Owen...
No, it puts you right at the back.
No, yeah, because you're not classified one way or another. Doesn't matter if you were disqualified on the last lap. If you were disqualified on the last lap, that's just ultimately tragic. But, oh shit, sorry.
John Lindberg.
Sorry, John Lindberg wins the US Grand Prix. I was focused a little bit on the battle between Axel and Owen, but Daniel will take P2. Stanley will take the on-track P3 and the fence at the same time. Now, Axel looks like he's got the measure of Owen. We'll see if that stays. Yep, so Axel will take his first podium of the season. 17 races in, and finally 18 races in, and Axel finally gets his first podium from Owen Bennett. Mackenzie crosses the line P6. Is it going to stay P6? No, it's not. It's going to be P8. So that's 10 points, I think, that No, actually, it'd be a bit more than that.
Defective P7.
No, it's still P8 here.
No, effective because Stanley.
Oh, right, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so P7. I've got to keep overlooking that. Anyway, I'll just look at inviting our 3 winning drivers. So, John, what?
I kept checking in on him, on the race director, and he had 0 warnings to the last lap.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, so we've got our 3 drivers in. We're just waiting to see. Oh, I want to say something a bit there, but I'm not going to. I'll say it after the broadcast. But great result to see 3 drivers of different, well, 3 different nationalities, I suppose you could call it either which way. But Axel Eriksson joins us in commentary for what is your first podium of the season, Axel. It's been a long time between drinks for you, so great result, and what better way to do it on the place that you scored your podium at last season before you almost got to the point of your first victory.
Yeah, I mean, I got very lucky with not being involved with dive bombs from a certain person at the start, and out of the other carnage at the start. And I had a quiet race for the most part. I was getting a little bit stressed at the end there because I had 2 warnings, and I knew that if I did one more corner cut, I would not get the podium. So yeah, it was quite stressing at the end there, but it was a good race and to be back on the podium.
Well, it's been a very long time between drinks for you, and it's been a long ride to get where you are. So it would be a good result for you and for your team. And I actually haven't looked at your championship or constructors bid, so I'll make sure to keep an eye on that one for next time. So thanks for your time. We'll see you in Mexico, maybe, depending on your busy schedule. Daniel Vale, P2. Because of Mackenzie down in P7, you've extended your championship points lead, though I think due to circumstances in Russia and in Japan, you could have almost very well have won the championship today had you have finished in those results that you had. So bit of work to do for you now in your pursuit for your first title, but salvaging a P2 finish, not too bad given your vocalness of not being too strong around this circuit.
Yes, the main goal was entering the podium and finishing ahead of Mackenzie. So yes, the goal, I managed to do the goal. But yeah, I'm not really proud of this race because it was impossible to follow John. He was in another level today.
Yes, he was, and it's just a good way to establish yourself and get yourself back on track after the mistake at Japan, and then of course whatever happened at Russia. We still haven't actually heard from you what happened on that, but we won't get onto that today. Congratulations, P2 championship points lead extends out a bit more, and we'll see you in Mexico where you opt to try and defend that championship a bit more. John Lindberg, P1, you took your first victory here last season. You've done it again. Looked pretty easy.
It seems to be a good track for me, yeah. I just got a very good run of things, I think. Quali went well, got pole, and got a gap when everybody behind started battling for P2. So I got out of the DRS and stuff, got a bit of a gap, and could just make sure I didn't get penalties and keep up a decent pace, and yeah, take it to the end. It's a fun track and I like it, so it's good to know that I'm competitive.
Well, I mean, it kind of backdrops on the fact of you've missed the last 3 or 4 races consecutively due to your work schedule, which is kind of throwing you off the championship battle a little bit. I mean, you're still within mathematical shots of it, but based on your work
Yeah,
ethics,
it's not like anything that I'm thinking about. But
no.
as such, I just show up to the races I can and try to have some fun and get some good results if I can.
And that's pretty much the end game as it
Maybe
is.
next season we'll see.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
it is.
we're gonna see different people in the categories, so you never know what's gonna happen, but more than likely
Yeah.
you're gonna see some more closer battles and more tight races for the win. So, Matt, you got any questions or anything you want to add before we close?
Uh, yeah, Axel, for this season, how frustrating has it been with all your lap one incidences? Do you feel you could have performed a lot better this season?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I have been involved in a ton of lap one incidents. Many haven't been my fault. Some have been, but it's been frustrating. But yeah, it's just about keep going and trying to be cautious, which is quite difficult when you're starting P4 in the middle of the pack. But I did well today, and I had contact with some of the guys, but never got any damage, and only lost a couple of seconds when I hit with the Stanley. So I avoided contact, and that was the recipe for the good results, pretty much.
And John, what happened on the last lap? I was watching the race director, and you had 0 warnings up until then.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to get just improve my fastest lap and went a bit wide on the second last corner. Because it's a blind apex, so it's easy to extend the track limits. So close to a warning-free race, but at least I didn't get a penalty. So.
Yeah, fair
Yeah,
enough.
it's still good.
Anyway, we'll drop
I
it
did
there.
improve a bit. But...
Yeah, I suppose that's all that matters, I guess. So anyway, we'll wrap it up there, and we'll call it a close for the F1 Grand Prix of the United States of A. I'm Brett Keenan with Matthew Elliott, our 3 winning drivers, John Lindberg, Daniel Vahl, and Axel Ericsson. Tune in about 2 hours' time for the F2 Grand Prix. Commentary by Mackenzie Stewart and Matthew Elliott, probably, with no Guy Tasker around. Tune in next week when we've got the Mexican Grand Prix for F3, 4, 3, 2, and 1, of course. The actual Australian Grand Prix, 5 o'clock New Zealand Standard Time. Don't know what that translates to around the world, so I'm not going to try and bother. And also tune in, I think Mark Bratby will be hosting coverage of the third race of the Trans Nation Supercars Championship at Kyoto Park with our aggregate point result concluded, so stay tuned in for that. So for now, it's Brett Keenan and Matthew Elliott signing out from the United States, and we'll see you again in El Mexico.